to welcome everybody to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. And today is Monday, June the 3rd, 2024. And our call-in number is 563-999-3581 and press 1, and that puts you into queue. Hold this 1 second. Excuse me. We'll give Michael just a moment to dial in. And if you have a question, press 1, and that puts a hand up. We'd love to hear from you and hear which direction you would like to have this conversation go. And we will be playing Dr. Tim's recording from Friday with Jamuna. So, Jamuna, you're still on there, so you'll get to re-listen to your process from Friday with Dr. Tim. That was awesome. And so we appreciate you thinking of us and participating with us. And Michael has joined us, so I am going to switch over and start Podbean, and I'm going to welcome him to the show.
Awesome. Thank you, dear heart, and welcome everybody. Once again, we get to play. So glad you're here. And did you say you had a hand up, sweetheart?
No, I do not.
Oh, okay. Well, if you're out there with a question or a thought, our call-in number, if you're on one of those stations where we can't see you on our control panel, it's 563-999-3581. 563-999-3581. And if you call that number, you'll be listening to the show directly, and then if you push 1, we will be having a conversation. So do you have any questions in the chat room or any email questions or anything to cover before we move forward?
I think everything's covered, and there's no hands up, no questions in the chat.
Cool.
We did just have a hand go up.
Great. Let's say hello.
I believe it's Miss Susan. Welcome.
Hi.
610. Hi.
Hey, hi guys. I'm doing 3 things at once, so this might be choppy. But Jeanie, was that your knee on Facebook with needles in it?
No, it's my shoulder.
Oh no!
Not sure. No, I had fallen the week before I went down to Florida with Susan, and but I thought my face took the full blunt of the fall, but apparently my arm took part of it. And they did some X-rays. They're not real sure yet what's going on. But anyway, he was giving me, until they're sure what's happening with the bone, he just gave me acupuncture or dry needling, whatever they call it, today. Yeah. And I go back to see him on Friday, so hopefully we'll have, no, actually I go back to see him tomorrow. So,
well,
we'll see what happens.
Is it a lot of pain or range of motion loss or what?
Oh, it's tremendous pain. I told Michael,
oh, no.
I said, I can usually handle pain pretty well. I said, I feel like a wimp because I'd really like to cry. And then his foot's bothering him, so I said, we were a good couple going out for my birthday yesterday. I said, he has one good leg and I have one good arm.
Oh, my God, and happy birthday. We're both Geminis. Yeah.
Yay.
Oh, boy. So, well, I'm sorry about the shoulder. How did you fall?
I was actually going up the steps in the house and just, I don't know if I missed a step or what, but I went down and I smacked my forehead on the step. But apparently I also hit my elbow and jammed up my arm a little bit.
God.
Yeah. And it hurt, but it just kept getting worse. And then Friday it was just excruciating. And it's been pretty rough 3 nights.
Oh.
I've got it in a sling right now just to take some of the weight off.
Yeah. Oh. And you said you're going to have an X-ray soon, right?
They actually took X-rays Friday, and he said that there was some calcification in my shoulder, which is part of the shoulder problem, but there's also a place in the middle of my humerus bone that he was questioning, and so he's having the radiologist to double check the X-ray and get a second opinion.
Good. Otherwise, you just got to tough it out, I guess.
Yeah, it has definitely been tough. We've used the Avicen and the Beamer and red light and all kinds of whatever we could think of, and but
sorry about it. Well, one of the things I really appreciate about both of you is when something's gone wrong in your department, you tell about it. You help us feel, comfortable or something, or self-accepting, because if something's wrong, you'll say it too. And I just appreciate that a lot. You also tell about your...
We are all in this together.
That's such a nice thing. It somehow heals all around just to have that kind of openness.
Yeah, and so, we've got a young guy that helps in the garden sometimes with us, and I actually texted him yesterday, and I said, well, Michael can't walk, and I can't lift. I said, can you come plant some plants? I had bought some the other day, and I said, I need to get them in the ground or they're going to die. So he and his girlfriend showed up this morning and got all of our plants in the garden. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. What's with your foot, Michael?
Oh, it's an old thing I've been working on for years, is clearing out family foot trauma. You've heard me speak of it before. You know, my last memory of my grandmother was after having had both of her feet taken off all the way up to her knees due to diabetes, and my mom having just the most gnarly, twisted feet anybody's ever seen. Fortunately, I don't have that, but I have had some layers of the trauma that she had, that my grandmother had, go through, and who knows how far back it goes. So, you know, just another layer, doing a lot of breathing.
You don't have diabetes, though, right?
Oh, no. Thank you, God.
Good.
No, everything's done pretty healthy front in that regard, but
good.
When this foot thing flares up, it's nasty.
Oh,
so I'm pretty much
pain?
staying off of it. If I stay off of it, it's no problem. It's just when I try to jump on it, it just does not want to cooperate.
Oh wow. Oh.
So time for me to expand my understanding.
Oh boy, I tell you. Well, good luck to both of you. Geez, Jeanie, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
The pain sounds awful. To have it be that bad. Oh, anyway. Yeah.
It's been pretty nasty. 2 days ago, I said, honey, it's hard to get her to stop. I finally said, bed, lay down, put your nails in, stop, day off, period, nothing, do nothing.
You don't take Sabbath. Jeanie, you don't take the Sabbath.
Well, I have this weekend. I think besides not sleeping very well at night, I have been able to sleep in the recliner during the day. And I think I've taken 2 or 3 naps for the last 2 or 3 days, which I never do.
Oh, that's good.
So sometimes I think
she's getting caught up on her Sabbath.
Yeah, I think sometimes we physically are given the message that we have to stop, you know?
Yeah, that's true. Totally true. Yeah. All right, well, that's what I wanted to ask. So I'll just get off and listen as I can. I'm waiting for 2 different phone calls, so I might not be very reliable today on the show.
Well, we'll be extending love in your direction.
Thanks.
All right, we appreciate you. And the fact that you are always extending that love in our direction, and I appreciate the edit you did on the article on the Middle East. I'm still working at how to integrate that. And
Michael, I wanted to ask you if I could share my shorter version with my Mind Shifter group, or would you rather I have them give your long one to them? Because the only thing is I'm not sure they'll read it all. I'm not even sure they'll read what I send, which is so much shorter. So,
go for it. Hand it off to them, and just put the request out if somebody wants to see a more detailed version. I was thinking the other day when we had talked about this, and it's like remembering that one of my doctorates is in holistic philosophy. So my tendency is to want to include the whole thing, because of course, it's kind of like it's kind of like when we've got a perspective, if you're down there with ant's eyes looking at the ground, you get to see what's going on between these two little bits of cinder, and that's it. You don't get to see the truck coming up the road, or the anteater coming along, or the blazing sun, or and as you pull out, you get to see the parking lot, and maybe there's an ant there, and maybe there's not, and then you pull out and see, there's a house there, and there's a street and a parking lot, and then you pull out a little further, and you go, well, where did the house go? The perspectives and being able to see things from an holistic, really literally how all of it's working together, to me is what empowers us to shift into the truly higher states that we're capable of. So that's why I have that thing about providing the whole picture.
Right. Well, I certainly hope I did not hurt that at all. I wanted to, it's sort of like an hors d'oeuvre. I wanted to give an hors d'oeuvre, and then they'd run for the big one. My daughter, when she was in training as a priest, she said one of the things that new priests do is they get in the pulpit and they just tell everything they've learned, and people get cross-eyed and fall asleep. And she said, we've got to learn to parse it out a little more. And you're so generous. You want to hand out the whole thing free. Tim Hayes was talking about that. It's crazy that it's free. For $100 a month, it would still be such a good deal. But, you're just giving it out, and it's wonderful. And I must say, from the years I've listened to you, it was great to read that whole thing again and again and again, because it's getting through. It takes me a long time. So you're right. But on the other hand, I don't want to lose the short attention span folks who are out there, and it's shorter than ever because of the internet and these little short clips people can watch,
Yes.
So anyway.
It has been a training program, I think, to keep people in that short attention span. And that way, once again, they don't get the whole overview. It's hard for them to comprehend, once they're broken down into finer and finer purposes, recognizing that axiom that, perception is a servant of purpose. And if I've been beat into submission, and I know that my purpose here is just to make money and buy things, I'm going to have a whole different perceptual construct, and my purpose is to understand what's going on in the world and become a contributing factor to everything that uplifts the world. The realities in those two different minds are going to be totally and completely different. And so, and it takes brain cells to build out higher possibilities, takes the brain cells to move to those higher possibilities. So, that's part of the effort of this work. And one of the reasons to keep moving the data around and making it available. And when somebody's ready, they'll pick it up and drink of it what they can. I remember there was a book, I don't even remember the name of it now, but it was written by a man in the Middle East. And it was about energy and healing and such. And somebody had given it to me. And I sat down with it and I tried to read it. And, I skimmed it and I looked at a page or two or three and I just put it aside, just, forgot about it. But I could not read it. And it was probably about a year later that I accidentally found out that I had put it in a briefcase, and I was on a flying trip, and I took that briefcase, just grabbed it, and when I got to my destination, that book was there in the briefcase. I opened it up, and I just ignored everything else that was going on, and I could not stop. I read every word in the book, without getting up once. It was, it was like I was ready for that. Previously, just bounced off. So we just never know, Montessori school, they have what they call a sensitive period, and when somebody's ready, they can take the full hose, flush wide open, and until they're ready, teaspoons too much. So my tendency is to hold the space for those that are ready for a full flush to go, here, I'll take it, and then those who aren't will just take what they can, and hopefully over time we will build a strong enough field for higher and higher perspectives that one day we're going to have 7.5 billion people wake up and go, oh, I'm a human being, I'm love. Oh, so are you. How cool is that? Let's start to function as humans. So, joining you in that, and have a blessed rest of the day.
Thanks, Michael. And Jeanie.
Delighted.
Good luck with the pain.
Delighted.
Yeah.
By the way, if you're going to present that to your Wednesday group, if you'd like to let me know, I'd be happy to participate. If you want to have a discussion
I'm
about
going to send it. Great. I'm going to send it to them just as something they can read, and then when I send them the link, which is the same every week, but I send them the Zoom link with what I call a teaser, something out of the way of mastery, something Michael Rice said, something, the Course in Miracles, as a springboard in case we need a prompt to get the discussion going, and almost never need the prompt. So I'm going to say something. I'm going to say, attached is a paper. And Michael, if it's okay, Michael wants to join us when and if we all read this and we can have a discussion. If you want to do that, I would love to offer that to them.
Cool. Keep me posted.
All right.
Your meeting is what time on Wednesday? Refresh me.
10:30 to noon.
Eastern.
Eastern.
And
it goes
while you're
right
saying
up
that,
until when? What?
While you're saying that, for the rest of our audience, every Wednesday from 10:30 to noon, Susan does a Mindshifters support group on Zoom. So wherever you are in the world, you could tap into it and be part of that conversation. So, and if somebody wants to be part of the conversation, if they want to be on your list, how do they do it?
They can email me, or I guess email me would be best. Susan Bingham.
Well, probably email Jeanie rather than put your internet address out or your email address out over.
Okay.
Seeing as how Jeanie at yagain.org. If you send it to Jeanie, then Jeanie will forward it to you, Susan.
I'm sure she has it, but I'll send it again. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. You notice how once in a while we get a crackpot that comes on, and you don't need crackpots having your email address.
Right. That is true. Okay.
Awesome.
I'll do that.
Well, you're appreciated.
Now. Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much. You too. Yeah. Bye.
Well, Miss Jeanie?
It is all quiet on the home front.
All is still. All is quiet. Well, I've had a couple of conversations with people who are talking about the violence that's going on, the violence that's being inspired, the violence that's being committed especially in America, but it doesn't seem to be limited in America right now. It seems to be kind of a moving thing around the world. I was doing some research in the historic roots of political violence, and it's interesting how along about the same time all over the world, back in the 30s, 40s, fascist type movements began to arise in the world. And you look at, go into Wikipedia and look at how many places that happened simultaneously, and you get some idea that somebody's coordinating and originating these things, or the energies coming in powerfully enough that a number of people are picking up on it. But when you recognize that we as a nation are pretty caring, well, every nation, caring, loving people. And, that's true of populations all over the world. If you look at some of the populations that have been denigrated in America in just the last few years, some of the sweetest stories that we've heard are people from those populations. And so the point here being that there's a hurting segment of the population that it really doesn't matter. Have you ever known anybody in your world that for no rational provocation whatsoever just go off on a tirade on somebody and just jump into, in some cases, infantile attacks, unreasoned blame, viciousness? And especially if people tend to think of themselves as superior and their superiority is not respected. And so I ended up doing some work in this arena after a conversation with someone, because they were asking, why is this going on? What's happening? Why is this becoming such a big thing? And my take is that kind of violence, and if you look historically, movements grow up out of a population when enough people don't have the tools and have that kind of unresolved family abuse that has happened. And if someone arises who holds that kind of vicious tongue, that violent rhetoric, it kind of gives permission to those who have a power person dynamic of violence to unleash the violence. So you look at the unresolved family abuse in our culture, the statistics, the numbers, the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the sexual abuse, which of course is usually associated with alcohol and any variety of substances from sugar. It's interesting, they did some research in prisons and they were trying to tamp down the violence, and they found that by removing one substance from the prison, the whole profile of violence changed. Guess what the substance was? It was sugar. The violence virtually disappeared from prisons where they removed sugar. And so what kind of addictions do people have besides alcohol and who knows what kind of substances? And the particularly pernicious addictive chemistry that's internally produced by hostility. There's so many just horrific examples of the kind of viciousness that is obvious to everybody except those who are caught in the syndrome. And one of the key components of this viciousness is the happening of intergenerational degradation of self or others. Now, if it's verbal degradation of self, that tends to be a relatively private thing, although it hurts people throughout the whole community. But when it becomes the verbal degradation of others, then the abuser, because the truth of their actions is inhibited by that mechanism called block to truth, have no idea what it is they're doing. And or if they do, they love it. They enjoy it. They're literally lit up by it. The definition of a sadist. And that word particularly applies in the realm of sexuality. That the sadist is aroused by violence. And in the last analysis, what it comes down to is that hurting people hurt people. Hostility is probably the second biggest addiction on the planet. And the user's hurts are almost always begin in early childhood. And if you just observe, we've talked several times about Shakespeare's passage that says, "My words fly up, my thoughts remain below." You look at the ancient scriptures, it basically said the power of life and death is in our words. And what kind of words do you suppose are going to create death, suffering, pain? Obviously, they're words based in hostility or fear. What kind of words are going to end up creating a life that's based in love and caring? It's going to be words that are based in love. And you can always spot the abuser by the language that they use, because language always precedes behavior. Especially if you take a look at the language that a person uses towards the weakest and most helpless among them, you know exactly what the outcome and what the behaviors are going to be, because speech always precedes behavior. So again, over the decades, if you trace back, and there's an interesting compendium if you look up fascism in Wikipedia and just read through how many places this arose just seemingly spontaneously throughout the world. And so my offering is that, and this is I think what's happening now, is that over the decades, movements have grown out of this globally present unresolved pain and abuse. And those movements, whose main feature is unreasoned, violent speech, attack, degradation, and violence, are simply repeating what's been done to them. They've been given permission. And somebody comes out of the closet with that, starts to use it, and nobody holds them accountable. Then many people make an assumption that, oh, well, so now, yesterday this would not be socially acceptable, but now it's okay. And these movements, they've been known by many names over the centuries, but ultimately they're a cult of force, using force to cause others to do their will. They grows out of control and fear. And anyone who comes out of a family system where a power person instilled fear in the children around them, use that force, then if that becomes a power person dynamic in someone's mind, then basically under stress, that's exactly where they're going to go. Now, it's been given lots of different names. It's been called fascism, quasi-fascist, national socialism, socialism, religious nationalism. If you, as I was thinking about this and doing some writing, I can remember being a kid and we used to watch Robin Hood, and it was like, oh, that's it. And just think, if you know your English history, what do the words "the Sheriff of Nottingham" mean? It sums up everything that I'm talking about. Do you have anybody in your world that acts like the Sheriff of Nottingham? And if so, and I mean, just that simple phrase, states the whole disease process. And it's definitely on the cusp of threatening not just America, but the world. So the features are subtly or grossly controlling others, just like their mom and daddies. Though they hated it when it was done to them, it becomes the behavior, because that's the power person dynamic. It's violent, it's brutal, lots of violence, control of women, sadly to the point of abuse, and street violence. And if you take a look at that and you recognize any mind energy in yourself in line with that, there's a pathway to healing, and it's called forgiveness. And to face those dynamics within oneself, to face what comes up inside of us when those dynamics are being played out, is a really important key to healing. And of course, what does healing mean? Well, Rumi in the 13th century, and I haven't used this quote in quite a while, so I'll plug it in here, said this. This is a 13th century Sufi poet. He says, love is the cure. Your pain will give birth to more pain until your eyes exhale love effortlessly as your body yields its scent. And forgiveness, and if we come from a long line of abusers, and I'll just say after 50 years of working in this field, and I don't even know, I've never sat down to count up how many countries, 20 or 30, common denominator throughout most of the culture, even in the, what people would call the fine and respectable families. The abuse, the trauma that's been inflicted. I remember I had a friend, I actually shared an apartment with a gentleman, goes back 50-some years ago before I moved into doing this work full time. And I had invited him. It was a few years later that I had discovered the still point breathing process, and we were visiting. And I'd invited him to do some breathing. And he's like, sure, what is it? I told him about it. He was of Greek heritage, fine, upstanding family that he just, thought was great. And I can remember going into maybe about the 20-minute point of his still point breath session. All of a sudden, he started to physically struggle. I mean, as though he were trying to get away from someone holding him down by his arms and his legs. And this was a guy that was a pretty successful, high-level businessman. He had his own retail store, probably, did $10 million business a year in cameras. And I can remember he looked like a child of 4. And he was struggling physically. And all he could say, this is just about 20 minutes into a still point session, all he could say to me, for me at this point, because recently I found out that he had passed, all he could say to me was, Michael, don't make me do this. Michael, don't make me do this. And all I was doing was encouraging him to breathe. But the horrendous power person family dynamics that he lived above, and he's someone that I'd known for many, many years. I'd actually shared an apartment with him for a couple of years. But nothing you ever saw in this successful businessman with his, he was one of the crispest dressers I ever known. You never saw Alex without just the best suit and tie tied perfectly and a perfectly starched shirt. And his Corvette Stingray always had a new one every year to 2 years. You'd never imagine there was anything like that in his life. And I'm talking, I'm not even sure what the time frame would have been, but from the time I met him, through a couple of years sharing an apartment with him, we co-rented an apartment together, kept in touch over the years. That still point session probably came 50 years after I knew him. There was not one signal, unless you knew what you were looking for unconsciously, belied this violent, vicious upbringing in his home, the physical abuse, the emotional abuse, the alcohol. And as I look over it, I think of the different places that I've been around the world. And sad to say, it's almost universal. Having just recently researched all of these violent movements, nationalist-type violent movements, and how many of them happened back in the 30s and 40s, it doesn't surprise me that it's moving around the world again. And to me, the objective of this work and the purpose of what we're doing is to become a relief valve for those kind of energy dynamics, so that when people learn that breath is the way to remove those energetic patterns, that being restored to proper balance physiologically is a way to remove those energetic patterns, and that the pent up or built up energy of them over generations and generations and generations and generations, when the relief valve opens to let off steam, it's awesome to watch. It's awesome to watch the physiological, the mental, the emotional, the relational, even the financial changes that happen in people's lives when they start to do that work. And to me, what we need to do is simply take it further and further afield, that this almost universal system of abuse I remember working with a gentleman, Jeanie and I were in Fort Lauderdale, and we were invited by a man who had an online presence with an AA group. And somebody was part of that AA group and introduced us. And he asked if I would come and do, he'd been sober for 30 or 35 years, I don't remember exactly, but something in that range, person dynamic, and how under stress this person's going to do whatever their power person did that they hated the most. And he got a little bit huffy about that at the end of the workshop. It's like, well, I know that's not true. What do you mean you know that's not true? I'm telling you that's universal. No, that's not true. When I was a kid, my father beat me mercilessly almost every day. And I have a son, and I never touched my son. And he was kind of like, jaw stuck out, sort of, see? And in the next second, I could have just knocked him over with a feather, because my question was, so, okay, I got it. You had enough willpower not to play out the family dynamic with your son. But how much time do you still spend trying to control your fists? I mean, he almost went into tears. It's like it ran his mind every minute of the day when he was under stress. Though he had the willpower to withhold the actual abuse. And it's interesting that when you look at the energetic dynamic, you'll remember we've talked about the three things that it takes for a power person dynamic to be instilled in a child's mind. And it's not always a child, but usually a child is where that happened. And the three things that happen is that the power person has more power over the child than the child has. The power person is not functioning as a human being. It's not functioning as love. And the child perceives the situation as survival. When you get down to the basic actuality of the world, we are energetic beings. And as an energetic being, when a child is subjected to those three circumstances, what happens is their field opens wide. And they become like an absorbing sponge. Now, I never did meet the son of this man, but I can bet that if we got into a conversation, if he started to process, that he felt abused by his father, though his father never physically abused him. But the fact that his father was always fighting with this energy of withholding his fists, because in that energetic dynamic, the child is functioning as an energetic being, and literally every energy that is in the field of that child is absorbed. Whether it's spoken or expressed or not doesn't matter. The child is sensitive enough energetically that it absorbs everything that's going on in the environment. And so while this man is strong enough to keep from hitting and beating on his child, the energetic pattern of hostility that's behind the inclination to do so, that's what needs to be forgiven. Elsewise, the child just sucks in all of that energy, and it becomes the foundation of that child's non-being self, the person that child thinks they are. You remember that Greek word persona means mask. It's something that we put on over our true being. And until the power-person dynamic is resolved, whenever, there are three behaviors, you've heard us talk about that in the past, there are three behaviors possible once a power-person dynamic has been put into a person's mind. The behavior that is going to take over and run the show will be dependent on the level of stress that one is under. And when there's little or no stress, then that child, now perhaps the adult, will do automatically. There's a thing in the mind we call the automatic decision system. That's how we'll automatically do whatever they did to get along with their power person. And then, if stress starts to build, up goes the stress, they'll shift out of that, and they'll do whatever they did to resist and survive with their power person. So that might mean going from Mr. or Ms. Nice Guy to Mr. or Ms. Snarky. And then when that person becomes ultra-stressed, and I don't care if it's, if they're 10, they've been on the planet circling for 10 years, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. If they've never gone in and cleaned that out of their mind, then the stress goes up, and that power person dynamic takes over, and now this person wants to do what their power person did to them that they hated the most. For this man, it was lash out and hit. Again, he was able to control himself. He didn't do it. But it reminds me of the story of the little kid and the small child in the baby bed, and mom says, "Lay down, lay down." Child's standing up in the crib, "Lay down." Mother goes over and lays the child down, and as the child is forced to lay down, you see in the cartoon, you see the bubble in the child's head that says, "I may look like I'm laying down, but in my head I'm still standing up." And to learn how to open that veil of the temple, the barrier between the subconscious and the unconscious mind, so that we have access to those generational patterns, to me, is absolutely the most valuable skill that you could ever acquire. And it's a skill that was shared on planet Earth over 2,000 years ago. And then, almost immediately, at least as far as I can tell, almost immediately, a global force came along and took over that tool and turned it into something it was never meant to be. So you'll notice we live in a culture that says, well, if they've done something so terrible that you're in pain, they're the cause of your pain. So what you do is you just forgive them. You just let them off the hook. Which, of course, means you never take responsibility for the power person dynamic that's at the root of the pain inside of yourself, and therefore the beat goes on. 2,000 years ago in the Aramaic language, the tool of forgiveness was offered as a way to collapse perceptual error, access the deeper hidden or unconscious parts of the mind, and clean them out, clean the trauma, clean the fear, the hostility, the rage, the guilt out of the system. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday, actually, someone that I did within the last year or so. 55, horrendously abusive childhood. He tells me that he was pretty good with his kids, but then when something happens, I listen to his language, and the language that he uses to describe his own children is pretty heavy-duty raunchy. Although he tells me, "Oh no, I never abused my kids." But out of that language is where abuse flows. And, I kind of gingerly played John the Baptist. I said, well, you've expressed an interest in healing, so let me just say, you tell me, you've been loving with them, but I noticed that, you recently, like within the last 3 minutes, spoke about two of your children And in your conversation about them, each of them, you dropped an F-bomb. And you tell me that you've been loving with them. Well, that's just my favorite word. Really? Well, I'm going to invite you to take a look, because behind that word is not anything based in love. And the trickster, if you go to some of the ancient cultures, the wily coyote, that was the name of the ego, the wily coyote, or the trickster, the clown, that could trick us into thinking that we'd resolve things we haven't started to face. And you only get to start to really, truly see those things when the stress is up and the chips are down. And most people arrange their lives to run in the opposite direction when that happens, when the stress comes up and the chips are down. Geographic here, I'm out of here. And to me, the genius of this man Yeshua 2,000 years ago, understanding that perception is nothing but a construct of the mind, is nothing but a reflection of what's contained within the body's mind, or what we call the mind, and that every reality generated by that mind always reflects the content that's there. And that this man knew that the driver or corrupted perception was the goals that you held in that given moment in regard to that given individual. And that the way to access your own unconscious mind was to collapse the constructs of your mind, pictures of other people, out of your own hidden dynamics. And that the core of forgiveness consists of, and it's just, mind-boggling genius to me, that this man understood that perception was driven by goals, and the word forgive in Aramaic is shabag or shabak, and it means to cancel. And when you cancel those goals, the constructs of your mind collapse in on themselves, and when they collapse in on themselves, you get access to your own unconscious dynamics. Otherwise, the mind's always got 1,000 reasons why. Yeah, well, but you see, this isn't mine. You see, no, I'm not experiencing this. I'm experiencing this because of them. No. You're experiencing what you're experiencing because of what is in you. And if you're willing to own what is in you, then what is in you, as Yeshua said in the book of Thomas, will heal you. If you refuse to own it, what is in you will destroy you. It's basically what was said in the book of Thomas. That was one of the books that did not get canonized. Sure of how are we going to heal this violence that's going on? I mean, so many vile voices, so many fraudulent, lying, intensely hateful voices. Well, the first order of business is to clean up every response in my mind to those voices. Or if I have a voice that contains that, to clean up the source of that voice in me. See, when we're under stress, the power person's voice speaks through us, only it sounds like our voice. We become ultra-stressed, literally, right down to, in many cases, the actual word patterns are exactly the words that the power person used. And when you cancel the goal that you hold in any given situation, where that situation seems to be the source or the cause of your upset, when you cancel the goal, the perceptual construct of your mind collapses, and when it collapses in on itself, you get access to your own unconscious. You get to start to clean up your own unconscious dynamics. To me, that's the beauty and the power and the hope of this work. And huge kudos and thanks to Yeshua for bringing that to us. And I'm looking at a picture just across from me of a gentleman named Dan McDougall, who is my former partner. in the Judicial Service Agency in Albany, Georgia, in the work of developing laws of living and the forgiveness process for the prison system. Huge thank you to you, Dan, for bringing it forward. For all those who perhaps knew Dan, and perhaps were at Heartland, those early days when every year Dan would come and he and I would do a laws of living class. It's a pretty precious time. So, Miss Jeanie, is that, go ahead, sweetie.
Yes, Jamuna in Podbean, she says what's coming up for her is how overwhelming being the Christ is and the healing that's truly needed to do this work. It seems like booby traps everywhere. Yeshua is right. Vigilance for the kingdom. Part of me is like, why even be here if no matter what, there are issues? Why did I come here? I responded to her, because you're willing to step up and the past generations didn't have the tools.
Yeah, we need a critical mass of people willing to be the space, hold the space, and take the level of responsibility to clean up their own minds. There are only 1 million more issues to work through as long as there are 1 million more issues inside of ourselves. And the tendency is to want to take our issues and put them on the stresses and strains that we see in the world. But the truth is, if I'm simply willing, it's like there are only 2 square feet I can change, and that's my own. And so when I experience some form of hostility or fear and my mind is focused on, to me, one of the most important things to do is to develop the ability, when there is disturbance or upset, to turn toward that disturbance or upset and have a conversation in my mind about me. What the mind of the world will constantly do when there's some sort of disturbance will be to turn from the disturbance and have a conversation about somebody else. And that makes a difference of night and day. To me, it's an exciting opportunity. And as I realize that as I clean up my issues, I clean up my issues. Whatever's going on in the world, I don't have to be in any kind of turmoil or trauma about it. Because the truth is, I've never been in turmoil or trauma about anything happening in the world. The only reason I've ever been in turmoil or trauma is because there's turmoil and trauma in me, and it's my opportunity to learn to forgive that. And as I do, then I more and more become the space of serenity that helps to build the critical mass that makes it possible for the whole game to change. So to me, it's an exciting privilege, and it's an exciting opportunity to bring this forward and to literally process through every part of my mind, of my family system, of my genetics that holds that somebody else is to blame for what's happening inside of me. And to me, it's a monumental privilege, absolutely monumental, that we get to do this.
And we have a hand up.
Awesome. Let's say hello.
Area code 541, I believe this is Miss Celinda.
Yes, it is Miss Celinda. How are you, Jeanie?
You're
I realize
welcome,
that
young
you
lady.
have a sore shoulder and you, Michael, have a sore foot. But hey,
That's
like
true.
I was telling Larry yesterday, he's farsighted, I'm nearsighted, and I said, hey, between us we have a complete set of eyes.
There you
so
go.
there you go. You have a complete set of shoulders and arms between you.
That's exactly what we said when we went into the restaurant for dinner last night, when the guy opened the door for us, and he's like, well, together we got 2 good arms and 2 good legs, but otherwise we're in challenge mode at this moment.
The very first date Larry took me on, he took me out to dinner, and he opened the menu, and he had this really embarrassed look on his face. He said, I forgot my glasses. Can you read the menu for me? that was the beginning of our relationship. Actually, the beginning, I invited him to dinner one evening, and right after dinner, he pops up and he says, "Let's do the dishes quickly because otherwise I'll fall asleep." so there you go.
You knew you had the right guy at that moment, right, when he volunteered to do the dishes.
Right. There you go. So anyway, I'm calling because I would like both of these shows today to be in your favorites. I don't know whether I'm just growing the brain cells and they just made everything come together for this moment in time, because I've got lots more brain cells to grow, of course. Or my work with you and my work with Dr. Tim and in the support group. And so I just would like both of those shows linked and as a favorite, or separate as a favorite, because they just build on each other. And he mentioned about Friday's show that he was going to make a favorite. And he mentioned your show as well. So apparently those two shows, the 31st and the 3rd, are stellar. I just wanted to let you know. They're not only stellar, they are the understanding you were talking about earlier, and I got that. I got
cool.
Dr.
Well, thank you for that feedback.
Dr. Tim actually is going to be gone tomorrow, and he's asked me to replay Friday's show where he and Jamuna processed and had questions, and so that'll be replayed again tomorrow.
Grateful. Yeah, I caught that. And this is our intense gardening season, and the weather has been so back and forth this year that we've hardly been able to get started. The old timers laugh at us newbies because they have this wait and see attitude about the spring, and it's never the same, of course, from year to year. Mother Nature does not follow our agendas at all. So I'm just really kind of behind the 8 ball in the garden, and there's just a lot of things happening. So I'll catch you when I can. I've just about lost the last 2 weeks. And so I have a feeling that May shows are really important. That's a really important month, especially towards the last, but it's hard to really say which show is most meaningful for me. And but there are a few that are just stellar, and my underground, my grounding and stellar shows. So there you go.
Cool. Well, and we've got some really nice support happening, and I know how many shows. We've got 2 people that are converting our special radio shows to MP4s, so they can also go on our YouTube channel. So they're between them, they're up to what?
Oh, sweet. Yeah, I would be on the YouTube more often. I come in on the phone shows because I just realized that over time, these past few years, that I only have 24 hours a day like everyone else, and that being on the computer is not part of my purpose for being here this time.
Right.
You know, and so
wouldn't it be nice to have 96-hour days?
Yeah, really. Well, we think everybody else does, right? But not us. That's when we have a flashlight flashing down on our heads, you know, singing "It's All About Me." Sorry, I have a jokester in my mind, and I see things in metaphors and cartoon situations. I love it.
Cool. Any other thoughts before the show closes us out?
No, other than you two are a blessing, as is Dr. Tim, as is every one of us who come in to listen.
Awesome. Well, holding the space and blessing your gardening. Ours has been interesting and moving forward. We had our first tomato sandwich yesterday morning for our fresh garden tomatoes. So that was pretty awesome. Say again?
Yeah, and Fenelon, I said, oh, I am so envious. And Fenelon's quote, it's a good one to remind us of every time, because I am seeing crocodiles everywhere, alligators and crocodiles everywhere, and they're snapping at my butt, I'll tell you. And I want them to go away. I don't want to look at them. What was that direct quote from the book of the one you just said about what we don't face? What was the quote out of the book of
From the
Thomas?
book of Thomas?
About that? Yeah, the book of Thomas.
Oh, yeah, Thomas. What is within us? If we face it, it will save us. If we won't deal with it, then it will destroy us.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, do you
That's a
have
paraphrase.
A book of Thomas? I mean, can you send me that quote by chance?
If you just do a Google search, it'll come up, I'm sure. I don't have it. I mean, it's something I read some time ago.
Okay, cool. That's good enough.
It'll be in the notes for the day, too.
Oh, thank you, sweetheart. And I just, yeah, that's what I'm looking at right now. I mean, how come every time I judge, I curse? You know, that cursing, cursing or blessing, that's all we have. And I am becoming so aware of how all my complaints and my criticisms and my, oh, poor me, and my judgments are all cursing. And
time for a shift.
When I look at it that way, yeah, time for a shift. A global, universal shift that starts one by one in each one of us, dear hearts. You take care.
Joining you in being a blessing.
Okay.
All right.